When we approach life like a three-gear car, most of our endeavors become easier, cleaner, and yield far better results. First gear is reserved for two distinct extremes: completely trivial tasks and critically important ones. On trivial matters, staying in first gear ensures you don't waste precious energy. On crucial tasks, first gear moves you slowly and deliberately, ensuring the outcome is rock solid. Third gear is meant for surface level reading, without intellectual depth, or situations demanding pure urgency. If a lawyer crawls through case files in first gear as if dissecting dense sociological theory, we'd simply call them an incompetent lawyer. The exact same principle applies to doctors. They must scan patient charts rapidly yet thoroughly and keep the momentum going. If we're at risk of missing a bus, a flight, or an appointment, third gear gets us exactly where we need to be, intact and on time. Second gear, curiously enough, is the most virtuous mode of all. As a rule of thumb, life should generally be lived in second gear. Wolf down a fine meal too fast and you miss the flavor. Drag it out endlessly, and I have to ask, is tasting food your sole purpose in life? Second gear hits the sweet spot. It keeps you from falling behind without letting your work turn sloppy. When reading books, second gear is the optimal standard. When tackling heavy texts, dropping into first gear at critical junctures allows you to digest the material thoroughly. Demanding endeavors generally demand first gear, yet there is a balance to maintain. Staying permanently locked in first gear, under the illusion that slow is always superior, will sometimes make you lose the thread of what you're reading entirely. For dense, demanding books, here is what I recommend. First, do a clean read-through in second gear. Next, drop into first gear, take notes, move slowly, reflect deeply, and truly internalize the text. Finally, execute a swift, full-length review in third gear. Take deliberate breaks between each phase so the material properly marinates in your mind. In my view, anyone approaching heavy text this way cannot possibly fail to attain complete top-tier comprehension. The exact same logic applies to language acquisition. For a while there were these irrational, bizarre methodologies floating around. Nonsense like skip grammar or keep reading. Even if you don't understand a single word, how could that ever work? If the person is starving, there is zero chance they get full without actually eating. Fantasizing about food, smelling it all day, or even chugging gallons of water will never satisfy that hunger. You inevitably have to sit down and eat the meal. When learning a language, you don't pace around the threshold. You walk right through the front door. While reading, you must look up every single unfamiliar word in the dictionary. No exceptions. You don't master a language by skirting around the edges. You grind through the friction, absorb the pain and push forward. Expecting a target language to magically seep into your brain by osmosis is pure fantasy. Without mastering grammar, you don't have a prayer of taking a single solid step. The only real solution is doing the actual work, not constantly running away. To be truly undefeated, you have to beat everyone. Someone who has never stepped into the ring has technically never been defeated either, yet we give zero credit to that kind of record. What I mean by this gear technique is that it's a rigorously practical framework built to answer one fundamental question. What strategy do I follow while fighting the fight? Because our purpose in life isn't merely stepping into the arena, defeating opponents, and surviving as long as possible. Fitness, career, intellect, relationships, psychological well-being, we have to struggle through, manage, and hit a viable standard of excellence across all of them. Of course, none of this is mandatory. One can always abandon everything and rot on the couch all day, but we actually have an objective. Because our energy is finite, just like our money, resources, and time, we cannot pour maximum force into every single domain. I'm not saying doing so makes you fail. I'm saying you literally lack the capacity for it. Run every single pursuit in third gear, and your battery will be completely dead after 3 tasks. Our objective is establishing a coherent strategy. We must manage all available resources with strict economy. Economy is never strictly about money. Even as I write this text, there is an economy I must respect. It needs to be substantive, hit a precise depth, and avoid dragging out unnecessarily. That is why we must calibrate our resources, energy, time, and capacity with precision. Otherwise, the outcome will still be failure, because if one side is neglected, total structural integrity is broken. Minor slips don't cost you points. In fact, when properly corrected, they earn you extra credit. What truly costs you points are systemic blunders. A slip is somewhat involuntary. It falls outside your direct conscious control. A blunder, however, rests squarely on your shoulders. It stems from negligence, trivialization, or a lack of focus. That is why we must master the art of self-governance and, above all, put it into active practice. For example, if we are carrying extra weight, we can run the fitness pillar of our life in third gear. We throttle socializing down to first gear and keep our professional career in second gear. Once that fitness cycle is solidly executed, we drop fitness into second gear and ramp social life up to second gear. If we're stepping into a new career phase or pivoting roles, We shift that domain into third gear, while keeping social life and fitness in first gear. Because energy is concentrated into a single focal point, the task wraps up rapidly without compromising structural quality. Afterward, we can shift fitness or socializing into whatever gear we choose. This forms what I call the cycle technique, which I look forward to sharing with you in the future. Broadly speaking, we can partition life into three core dimensions: work, people, and self. These naturally branch out into further subdomains. We can divide the self dimension into fitness, books, language, cinema, and inner peace. As you can see, we can branch this out even further. For instance, we can divide the reading domain into psychology, history, and sociology. Psychology can branch into clinical psychology, developmental psychology, and the history of psychology. Developmental psychology can split into physical development, cognitive development, and spiritual development. This hierarchy applies to virtually everything, depending on the density of the subject. Certain areas simply branch out further than others. This is where the gear technique proves indispensable. It gives us direct visual clarity on exactly how deep to drill into any given area, handing us a high leverage edge in self-management.